I didn't expect this Christmas to feel so quiet. The kind of quiet that presses down on you when the house isn't really a home at the moment. I'm standing in the kitchen, the snow falling softly outside, just enough to blur the edges of the world, and I'm setting a plate on the table. Steam rises from the food, curling into the cold air, and I catch myself hoping, even for a second, that someone might notice, maybe my parents. I thought this year might be different, maybe they'd notice me, but the house is empty. Completely empty. The only sounds are the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards. I can feel the weight of silence stretching across the rooms, thick and heavy. I run my hands over the edge of the plate, smooth and cold, and I try to ignore the small gnawing feeling in my chest. The last few days haven't been normal. My texts went unanswered, my calls met with short, clipped responses. A busy here, a not now there. It's subtle, but it adds up. And now, standing here, I realize just how loud that absence feels that I can't help but remember last year. The tree lit up the living room, its lights warm and golden. Laughter bounced from wall to wall. I remember my dad pretending to be angry. When I tried to sneak a cookie before dinner, my mom shaking her head with a soft, exasperated smile. Even the smell of the kitchen, the roasted vegetables, the sugar from the pie cooling on the counter, felt alive, like it was inviting me in. I stare at the plate in front of me, and I realize it's the same food, but it's missing something. Someone. The echoes of last year's laughter feel like a cruel reminder. I set the fork down, and the cold metal clicks against the plate, startling in the emptiness. I think, maybe if I just sit here long enough, they'll come back. Maybe this isn't real. Outside, the snow keeps falling, muffling the world. Inside, I try to fill the silence with little rituals, lining up the cutlery, arranging the napkin just right, anything to make this house feel less empty. But it doesn't work. The quiet won't let me forget that something is off, and in that quiet, I sit and I wait. I wait for a knock on the door, a familiar laugh, a call, anything. But all I hear is the soft whistle of the wind through the trees and the way my own heartbeat seems impossibly loud. I was just about to take a bite when my phone buzzed. Small vibrations, barely noticeable at first, but in that quiet house, it felt like an alarm. I picked it up slowly, half expecting it to be a wrong number or a delivery notification. And then I saw it. My parents. A lump formed in my throat before I even read the message. We're going out tonight. Don't wait up. Merry Christmas. I stared at the screen like it had suddenly lost all meaning. My brain tried to argue with itself. Surely, this has to be a mistake. Maybe they meant someone else. Maybe it's a joke. I read it again. Same words. Same cruel little punctuation. That made it feel official. I remember standing there, plate untouched, the fork hovering in my hand like I wasn't sure what it was for anymore. My first instinct was to call back, to demand some explanation. But what would I even say? Why am I being left out? That sounded pathetic even to me. And yet the ache in my chest screamed it anyway. I thought about all the little signs I had ignored in the last week. The curt messages. The hurried, "I'll call you later." The way they barely looked at me during dinner. They were all pointing to this moment, and yet part of me still couldn't believe it. It was Christmas. It was supposed to be for family, for togetherness, for warmth. Not this. A memory hits me then. A flashback to 2 years ago, snow falling just like tonight, the same glow of the tree lights reflecting in their eyes. My dad laughing at a joke my mom made, and me, sitting on the couch with my hot chocolate, feeling like I belonged. That feeling feels so far away now, like a dream I can't reach back to. I dropped the phone onto the table with a little clatter. The sound is loud in the silence, echoing in the empty room. I feel an odd mixture of disbelief and anger, like my mind is arguing with itself. This can't be real. They can't actually do this. But the reality is stubborn, and it settles over me like frost on the window pane. I take a deep breath, and it catches in my chest. I'm supposed to celebrate. I'm supposed to feel the joy of Christmas. Instead, I'm here alone, facing a quiet so sharp it cuts through every memory of warmth I had. I sit down slowly, letting my shoulders slump. The fork is heavy in my hand, the food in front of me suddenly tasteless. And all I can think is, how did it come to this? How did I end up here, on Christmas, completely invisible to the people I thought loved me? I sit down, alone, and stare at the plate I've set in front of me. It's ridiculous, really, just me, a single chair, a meal that's supposed to feel festive but tastes like ash before I even take a bite. I try to convince myself that it's fine, that I can make this feel normal. I even tell myself, out loud, it's okay. I can enjoy this. Just me, my food, and the snow outside. But the words feel hollow. The table is quiet. Too quiet. Every small sound I make, the clink of cutlery, the soft scrape of a chair, seems to echo, bouncing off walls that were meant to feel warm, welcoming. I breathe in, and the smell of roasted vegetables and cinnamon from the pie hits me. But instead of comforting, it mocks me. Last year, this scent meant laughter, hugs, and being part of something. This year, it's just me, chewing in silence that I remember my parents bustling around the kitchen, wrapping gifts and shouting reminders to each other over holiday music. And I feel the sting of absence all the sharper. I try to ignore it, focusing on arranging my fork and knife just right, lining up the napkin like some ceremonial attempt at normalcy. Maybe if I do everything perfectly, it will feel less like I'm sitting alone, invisible. And yet, even as I try to distract myself, my mind drifts to the small slights over the past week. The curt text messages, the ignored phone calls, the way they didn't even ask if I'd like to join in. It's subtle, the way hurt creeps in, but it grows heavy quickly, like snow piling up on the roof until the weight is unbearable that I take a bite, mechanically, and the taste barely registers. My thoughts are louder than the food in my mouth. I can hear the imagined laughter from the living room, their voices blending into a distant hum of merriment I'm not allowed to be part of. My fork trembles slightly in my hand. I push the food around the plate, tasting nothing, thinking of nothing, trying to fill the silence with something. Anything. A memory surfaces without warning. Last year, my mom leaned over and whispered, "I love you, you're part of this family." That tiny, almost forgotten sentence echoes through my mind. And now, sitting here alone, it feels like a cruel joke. The family I once knew seems so far away, like it belongs to someone else entirely. I glance at the empty chair across from me. I imagine it filled with warmth, with laughter, with someone noticing that I exist. I imagine being invited, being included, being seen. And then reality hits, harsh and sharp, like frost on bare skin. I'm the only one here. Just me, my plate, and the quiet. I take another bite, slower this time. The act itself feels like defiance, like, if I eat, I survive. Even if no one else cares. Even if the room stays silent. Even if the world outside feels miles away. I eat because I have to, because there's no one here to do it for me. No one here to notice if I stop. And as I sit there, chewing and swallowing, I realize something I didn't want to admit. Christmas, at least this year, isn't about celebration. It's about survival. About holding yourself together when the people you thought mattered the most walk away. I put my fork down and lean back slightly, letting my eyes drift toward the window. The snow outside has grown heavier, falling in thick, lazy flakes. Each one silent as it touches the earth. And in that quiet, memories begin to rise, uninvited but impossible to ignore. That I can see it so clearly. Last year's Christmas morning. The living room bathed in the soft golden glow of the tree lights, ornaments glinting like tiny stars. My dad, pretending to scold me for sneaking cookies, but his laughter giving him away. My mom, hands covered in flour, shaking her head with that same soft, exasperated smile she always wore when we were chaotic together. And Grandpa, I remember him best of all, lifting me onto the sofa so I could place the star on top of the tree, his hands steady, strong, but gentle. I can feel the warmth of his coat brushing against my cheek, hear the soft chuckle in his voice. As I wobbled precariously, terrified I'd drop the star. I didn't realize then how small those moments were, how much they mattered. But now, sitting alone, they feel monumental. I close my eyes, and I can hear it all again. The clatter of wrapping paper, the soft hum of Christmas carols, the way laughter bounced off the walls and made the whole house feel alive. I remember the smell too, cinnamon and pine and roasted vegetables, all blending together into something that felt like home. And now, nothing. I open my eyes, and the living room is empty. The lights from the tree in the corner flicker faintly, but they don't reach me. The warmth has left with everyone else, leaving me here, gripping my fork like it's the only connection to reality. I take a bite mechanically, tasting more memory than food, and a hollow ache settles in my chest. I remember thinking back then that Christmas would always be this way, full of laughter, warmth, family. I didn't know life could twist so fast, that one year could go from comfort to cold silence. I didn't know that a simple evening, a simple meal, could feel like both a dream remembered and a punishment endured. The bitter laugh escapes me, quiet, almost sarcastic. I guess some traditions change, I whisper to myself, and the sound feels strange in the emptiness. I push my plate slightly forward, not because I'm finished, but because it's the only movement my body seems capable of, and yet, even in this solitude, I can feel the weight of that memory pressing against me, reminding me that I once belonged, that I once mattered, that warmth exists somewhere, just not here tonight. That I take a deep breath and let it shiver through me, tasting the past and present all at once. And for the first time since sitting down, I notice something I hadn't before. The snow outside isn't just cold. It's quiet. It's patient. And maybe, it's waiting too. I was halfway through another bite when I heard it, a faint, clinking, muffled laughter drifting through the walls. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe it was the wind, or the way the snow muffled the world outside. But then, unmistakably, there it was, my parents' voices, carrying through the house like a song I wasn't allowed to sing along to. I froze. Fork halfway to my mouth, I didn't dare move. Each laugh, each cheerful exclamation, felt like a punch to the chest. I could hear the subtle rise and fall of their conversation, the way they sounded, happy, completely happy. And I wasn't. Part of it that I wanted to scream, to knock on the wall, to demand they notice me. But the words caught in my throat. They hadn't called. They hadn't invited me. I wasn't even a thought on their Christmas night. Just a ghost sitting in a quiet room, tasting food I didn't even want anymore, that I remember to fight from a few weeks ago. Minor, almost laughable in hindsight. A disagreement over something stupid. Homework, a missed chore, but it lingered longer than it should have. Now, every tiny argument, every curt text, every cold glance made sense. They weren't angry. They just didn't care. Not tonight. Not about me. I clenched my jaw and swallowed hard, letting the fork drop to the plate with a hollow clatter. The sound barely carried over the laughter, but it felt like a small protest. A reminder, I exist, even if no one else sees me. And yet, as I sat there, a strange mix of anger and disbelief began to swirl. How could they leave me like this? It's Christmas. How could family, my family, celebrate while I sit alone? I wanted to hate them. I wanted to march into the next room and shout. But the thought of confrontation felt pointless. They didn't notice before. Why would tonight be different? I leaned back in my chair, resting my forehead against my hands. The warmth from the food barely reached me anymore. The glow from the tree lights in the corner flickered softly, but it felt like a mockery now, a reminder of everything I was missing. I felt small, invisible, forgotten. And the more I listened, the more I realized this wasn't just a one-off. This was the pattern I'd ignored, the absence I'd rationalized, the neglect I'd hoped would change. But tonight, it was undeniable. I was not part of this celebration. I was not part of their joy. I let out a bitter laugh, low and almost sarcastic, and picked up the fork again. Not because I wanted to eat, but because I had to. Because surviving this alone was the only thing left that made sense. I put the fork down and stared at the plate, feeling the warmth of the food do nothing to thaw the cold hollow inside me. I didn't cry at first, not really. I tried to hold it in, tried to convince myself that I was fine, that this was just another quiet evening. But then, it slipped out. A single tear rolled down my cheek, and suddenly, the dam broke. I covered my face with my hands, and the tears came freely. I wasn't just crying for the missed Christmas, for the laughter I couldn't join, or the family that didn't seem to notice me. I was crying for every small heartbreak I'd buried, every overlooked text, every shrug of indifference, every time I had quietly hoped to be seen and loved. Great, I muttered sarcastically to myself, my voice cracking. Perfect Christmas. Just me, my tears, and some cold food. Really festive. The words sounded bitter even as I said them, and yet, somehow, saying them aloud made the room feel slightly less suffocating. I touched the plate again, running my fingers over the edge. The steam from the food blurred the tears on my face. The warmth was meant to comfort, but it only highlighted the contrast with the cold emptiness of the room. I shivered slightly, not from the temperature, but from the sheer weight of being unseen that I thought of Grandpa. Always calm, always patient. I remembered him kneeling beside me after some minor disappointment in the past, telling me that it's okay to feel hurt, that being upset doesn't make you weak. I hadn't realized until now how much I relied on him. Even silently, I leaned back in the chair, letting the memories wash over me. The smells of Christmas past, the pie cooling on the counter, the scent of pine and cinnamon, clashed sharply with the present silence. I laughed bitterly again, more from helplessness than humor. I guess this is what family means sometimes, I whispered, voice trembling. You show up for some and ignore the rest. The tears slowed, but the ache remained. I rubbed my eyes, tasting the bitterness, feeling it settle deep in my chest. For a long moment, I just sat there, alone, with the ghost of my family's laughter echoing through the walls and the snow outside falling silently, patiently, like it knew my pain and didn't judge. And then, in the quiet between sobs, I realized I had to finish this meal. Not for anyone else, not for the celebration I wasn't part of, but for myself. Because if I didn't, I'd be giving up entirely. And I wasn't ready to do that. Not yet that I was wiping the last traces of tears from my cheeks when I heard it, a soft, deliberate knock at the door. My heart jumped so violently that I almost dropped the fork. For a second, I froze, listening. It couldn't be, could it? Who would come here? On this night. On a night I was supposed to be invisible. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. The house had been so silent that even the faintest sound felt deafening. Another knock, slightly louder this time, echoed through the hallway. My hands trembled as I set the fork down and wiped my hands on my lap, trying to steady my racing thoughts. What? Who is it? I whispered to myself, my voice barely carrying through the room. I stood slowly. Each step toward the door weighted with disbelief and hope I didn't trust. I glanced back at the empty chair across the table, at the untouched plate of food, and for a moment considered ignoring it, pretending nothing had happened. Maybe it was someone else. Maybe it was just the wind knocking something loose outside. But there was a persistence to it, a certainty. Whoever it was, they weren't going to leave. My chest tightened as I reached for the doorknob. My fingers brushed the cold metal, and for a heartbeat, I hesitated. I wasn't sure I was ready to see anyone who might remind me how alone I really was. And then I remembered. Grandpa, that little voice in my memory, warm and steady. I'm always here for you, even when everyone else isn't. Could it really be him? I shook my head, trying to quiet the fragile hope rising in me. Maybe it was too much to wish for on a night like this. Another soft knock. And then, almost as if he knew the exact right moment, the door creaked open. I squinted into the dim hallway light, my breath catching. Shadows stretched across the floor, and I could just make out a familiar figure. Slow steps, quiet but confident, and then I saw him. Grandpa.my knees nearly gave out. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, or do both at the same time. The snow outside pressed against the glass, the cold spilling in faintly, but inside. The warmth of his presence seemed to push the chill away. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me, eyes kind, patient, and full of the unspoken understanding that words could never convey. That I felt my heart unclench slightly, the tension in my shoulders easing just a fraction. The fork slipped from my fingers again, but this time it didn't matter. Because someone was here. Someone who saw me. Someone who didn't let me sit alone in the dark. Even on a night I felt completely abandoned, he stepped fully into the room, closing the door softly behind him. The dim light caught the edges of his face, lined with age but full of the steady kindness I had always counted on. In his hands, he carried a small bag, a pie perhaps, or maybe just something to share, but it didn't matter. It wasn't what he brought. It was him. I froze, unsure whether to run to him or collapse in relief. Where I sat, he didn't rush me either way. He simply walked toward me, each step calm and deliberate, as if he'd always known exactly how much I needed him tonight. Hey, he said softly, voice warm and low, the kind of voice that made you feel safe, even in the worst of storms. I didn't answer at first, just stared, my throat too tight to form words. My chest felt like it could burst from relief and disbelief all at once. Memories of him flooded in suddenly. like waves I hadn't realized were waiting. I remembered him lifting me onto the sofa to place the star on the Christmas tree, his laughter, quiet but firm when I wobbled. I remembered him kneeling beside me when I cried over small disappointments, reminding me that feelings were okay, that they didn't make me weak. And now, here he was again. No instructions, no judgment, just presence, just care. I could feel tears pricking again, but this time they weren't only sorrow. They were relief, gratitude, and something like hope. That he set the bag down gently, and I noticed the familiar smell of baked goods mixing with the piney scent of the tree, and for a moment, it felt like last year all over again, but better, because this time I wasn't just remembering warmth. I was living it, even if only through him. He didn't say much, just pulled up a chair beside mine and gave a small, reassuring smile. "Merry Christmas," he said simply. That's all it took. Those two words, spoken quietly, made the emptiness of the room retreat a little. The silence that had been suffocating me was replaced by the subtle rhythm of presence, just breathing in the same room, sitting together, and somehow, finally, belonging. That I reached out instinctively, and he took my hand. It felt like coming home. I laughed quietly, a sound mingling relief and disbelief, and he laughed with me, the warmth of it settling in my chest. I realized then that family isn't always who you expect. Sometimes, it's who shows up when the rest of the world leaves you behind. For the first time that night, I let myself relax, feeling the sharp edges of loneliness dull slightly. The snow outside continued to fall, but the cold didn't matter anymore. Grandpa was here, and for tonight, that was enough. Grandpa and I sat down together at the little table, the two plates before us suddenly feeling less lonely. For a moment, we just looked at each other, both of us aware of the silence we were breaking, not the absence of sound, but the absence of connection I had been living in all evening. I picked up my fork again, but this time, the food tasted different. Warm, yes, but now there was laughter seasoning it too. A small, almost mischievous smile tugged at Grandpa's lips as he cut into the pie he'd brought. "Saved you a slice," he said, and I realized it didn't matter if it was literal or symbolic. The gesture alone told me everything I needed to know. I was seen. I was wanted. I belonged. We ate slowly, not because we were hungry, but because the act itself mattered. Each bite was a tiny reclaiming of what had been stolen from me earlier, my sense of joy, my sense of being part of something. We talked quietly, sharing memories of past Christmases, small jokes, and gentle teasing. The kind of conversation that doesn't need to fill every silence, but fills your heart. That I could smell the cinnamon in the pie, the warmth of the roasted vegetables, and even the faint hint of pine from the tree. Every sensory detail felt magnified, more vivid, more alive, because it was shared. The snow outside continued to fall, blanketing the world in white, but inside, it was warm, cozy, and real. For the first time in hours, maybe days, I laughed without the bitterness that had been clinging to me. Grandpa joined in, his laugh low and steady, and it felt like a balm on all the raw edges of my heart. I realized then that sometimes, family isn't about who's present all the time. It's about who shows up when you need them the most, even if they're the only one. That we lingered over the meal, savoring more than just food. We shared stories, memories, small confessions that felt safe to voice in the quiet glow of the room. I looked at him and thought, this is what Christmas should feel like. Not the clamor and chaos I had once believed was essential, but this connection, warmth, and the simple joy of being together. When we finally pushed back from the table, I felt lighter. Not completely healed, not untouched by the hurt earlier, but healed enough to know that Christmas hadn't been lost entirely. It had just changed shape. And for tonight, that shape was exactly what I needed. I caught his eyes and smiled, and he nodded, as if to say, see, everything's okay now. And for the first time, I truly believed it. The meal was finished, the plates cleared, and the quiet that settled afterward felt different this time. It wasn't heavy or suffocating. It was peaceful, the kind of peace that comes from knowing someone cares enough to show up when the world turns its back. Grandpa stood to leave, his hand lingering for a brief squeeze on my shoulder. "Remember," he said softly, "family isn't always where you expect it, but it's always here if you look for it." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Words failed me, but the warmth of his presence, the care in that simple phrase, said everything I needed. He left, the door clicking shut behind him, and suddenly, the house felt both empty and full at the same time. Empty in the literal sense, yes, but full with something far more enduring. Hope, love, and the knowledge that I wasn't truly alone. That I wandered back to the table, the faint glow of the candle flickering softly. My plate sat there, remnants of the meal, but now it felt more like a witness to the night's transformation than a symbol of solitude. I could still hear the echoes of laughter from earlier, but now they weren't mocking. They were memories I could carry with me, sweet and comforting. Instead of painful reminders of neglect, that I looked out the window at the snow falling, covering the world in white, and I realized something. Sometimes the moments that hurt the most are the ones that teach us the most. Being left alone tonight hurt in ways I hadn't expected, but it also showed me the value of those who truly see you, who reach for you when everyone else turns away. That I took a deep breath, letting the cold air mix with the warmth still lingering in the room, and I smiled. Not the forced kind of smile that hides the hurt, but the quiet, real smile that comes when you realize you're stronger than you thought, and that love, real love, can find you even in the darkest hours. Tonight, Christmas wasn't what I had imagined. It wasn't what I wanted, but it became something I would never forget. A night of loneliness, yes, but also a night of unexpected love, of presence when it mattered most, of lessons that would stay with me forever. That I blew out the candle, watching the tiny flame vanish, and I felt a warmth settle deep inside me. I was still me. I was still here. And in that moment, that was more than enough.